My name is Jessica Domiczew, and as Thomas said, I work for the Dyfed Archaeological Trust. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the exciting work we've recently done on a project called the Coastal Uplands Heritage and Tourism Project, also known as CUPAT. Now, I know many people here have been to my events and talks, but for those who haven't, the CUPAT project was an Ireland and Wales project. It was one of the last of the EU-funded projects, so it ended in August 2023, but we still have some work carrying on, and hopefully our website with some of the stuff that I'm showing today will be live soon. Now, the aim of the project was to work with local communities and businesses in 4 coastal upland areas to help increase their knowledge and understanding of their natural and cultural resources and help to support businesses with sharing these resources with people from further afield to bring them away from the coast and more into the upland areas. So there were 3 partners in this project, or main partners. There was Aberystwyth University, University College Dublin, and Dyfed Archaeological Trust, but we were also working with the wonderful planner team and David from the Cambrian Mountains Initiative as well. So we had a really nice group, and the 4 coastal upland areas that we were looking at were the Wicklows and Blackstairs Mountains in Ireland and the Cambrian Mountains and Mynydd Preseli in Wales. And the natural and cultural resources that we were looking at, and we've done a lot of activities through these and worked on different sites, these were called our themes, and we focus on the archaeology, geology and landforms, community life, so folklore and photographs, and biodiversity in these regions. So my role on the project was to help with the archaeology and the heritage in Wales, and I helped with creating interactive 3D models of sites and artefacts, but also creating citizen science activities where communities can get involved and help create useful data in the field. So we did a range of different things in the different areas through CUPAT, but I'm very aware that I only have half an hour here. So I'm going to focus down on the Mynydd Preseli region and the 2 sites that we focused on archaeologically. So the first one was Llanllawer Church, just above Llanacaya, outside Fishguard. And the other area we looked at was the Preseli Ridge, also known as the Golden Road to some. And we looked at a range of sites along there doing different work, but the one site I really want to focus on today is one which we did the most work on, called Voildragan Hill Fort, and I've got some really exciting stuff to show you today. So starting off with Llanllawer Church, so usually I deal with prehistoric sites and haven't really done many things with churches, but I've absolutely fallen in love with this little place. And the reason why our project decided to select this site as, or this church as a site, is because sadly it's deteriorating. As you can see on the picture, just on the edge, the roof is starting to come off, just exposing the wooden beams, which we can see are actually starting to rot down. So if nothing's done within the next 50 years or so, maybe longer, hopefully, we'll probably end up losing, sadly, this lovely building. And another reason why we wanted to work on it is we noticed there wasn't much archaeological work that's been done here. There's not been much graveyard recording or any recording of the building either. And one last thing that really persuaded us to choose this site was it's really important to the local community. So there's a lot of people there who still remember when this church was in use, and a lot of people still have family members buried here. Now, this site has a really uncertain history. It's really interesting. So what we see here is actually the rebuild from the 1860s. And even though there's no evidence of an earlier structure, there's actually quite a lot of evidence around the site to suggest earlier possible medieval origins. And those indications include early medieval cross-carved crosses. So there's 4 on this site. There are 2 that are within the entrance of the graveyard, so we have one of them on the right here, And then we have two that are in the walls of the actual church itself. So on the left, I've got the one that's on the outside, and then there's one on the inside, which I sadly couldn't access because it was getting quite dangerous in there, and the floor is starting to go away. And so there is documentation suggesting that these crosses actually came from an earlier structure in the area. And there were also aerial photographs done of this site, and there was a suggestion that there may be an earlier enclosure which encloses the church, but also this lovely holy well that's in the field next door. We think it's a natural spring that's been used since the medieval period and over time been elaborated with this lovely sort of stone dome over the top. And as you can see from the picture, pilgrims come along to this site and leave objects, and the water here is believed to cure sore eyes and was quite popular for people to come and visit. Now, there's been no work done on trying to find this enclosure, and so this is the early medieval sort of indications. And the rest of the history of the site, rebuilt in the 1860s and used throughout to the 1992 when it was shut, and now it's in private ownership. So what did we do with this site? So there was a range of things we wanted to do. Graveyard recording, we wanted to investigate that possible closure, and we wanted to do something to help capture the building in time as it is before we lose any more. And so this is an aerial photo that we took of the site before we did any work. And what we decided to do was a week's community project, which was run by my colleague Jack Rowe. Sadly, I couldn't be on site during that week. And what we did was vegetation clearance, graveyard recording, and then a few other things which I'll talk about in a second. And this is what it looked like near the end of the week. So they cleared a lot of vegetation, and the local farmer was really helpful in helping us with removing that vegetation and storing it elsewhere. So as you can see, there's more gravestones that have been revealed, but still there's not that many, not as much as we expected. So we think over time they've been lost, moved to the side, maybe buried underground. But it still gave us a lot of work to do. And so with the graveyard recording, we took a variety of photographs, and we got people to record the inscriptions on the gravestones, the material they're made out of, the shape, their condition, any artwork, because this hasn't been done before. So we've collected all that information, and then we also decided as well to survey in the gravestones, and then our colleague Charlie produced this wonderful plan for us of all the gravestones, and from here you can now see that down on sort of the left side, bottom left, we have a possible family unit. The graves in front of the church are actually some of the later burials. We've had some sort of data from the 1800s all the way to the late 20th century. And they're not all just local people, so a lot of them also come from Fishguard, especially Lower Town, and there's actually to the south of the site a footpath that goes all the way to Fishguard, and the local farmer told me that he's been told that people used to carry up their dead through there and bury them in this graveyard. And we have a range of adults and children here. We've got a gravestone for Reverend William Griffiths, who was the first minister of Tabor Chapel in Dinas, and we also have some of the Harry's family members who were from nearby Treftadaeth and were part of the Calvinistic Methodist movement. So it was quite interesting, and we had a range of people come and volunteer. So we had local people, we had people who had family members buried there, we also had the Fishguard and Goodwick History Society come as well. So that was looking at the graveyard, and then we wanted to explore this possible enclosure that was found through aerial photographs. So we carried out geophysical survey. We did a mixture of magnetometry and resistivity, and this are the results we have. We did find an earlier evidence of an enclosure or part of the churchyard, but it's not the one that we thought we were going to get from the aerial photographs, because their one seems to be a massive one that goes around the Holy Well as well, whereas from here you can see at the bottom, just below to the south of the current graveyard, you can see that the wall used to extend out and round. We have no evidence of when this was first constructed or when it was destroyed, so some further work there would be fantastic, and we do think there'll be additional burials in there as well. So we were really excited when we found that. So that was looking at the outside of the churchyard, and then we want to focus on the building. And what we wanted to do was try and capture this in time, help with monitoring the site, a lot like what Toby Driver was saying with the sites and with climate change. So just like what Toby Driver had done with his sites, was we got permissions and we took up a drone, took photographs of the site, and we stitched these together to create a 3D model of the site, which you can zoom in and out of, and you can really see some fine details. Now, I do have a link here for the model. This is the static view, but I'm not going to touch the link now, because knowing my luck, it will go horribly wrong trying to connect to the internet. But if anyone would like to see these models, any models throughout the PowerPoint, then please come to see me afterwards. Like Toby mentioned before, these are all on Sketchfab. So you can go on Google Sketchfab, go on there, you can type in CAPAT or Dyfed Archaeological Trust, and you'll be able to find these and have a bit of a play around. And we also created a model of the well as well, just to be able to keep an eye on that over time. So that sort of wraps up what we did at Llanllawer Church. So in the week, we managed to achieve quite a lot, and we found out a lot of exciting information. And especially with the plan, it's really useful. So if nothing is done, sadly, with this site, and it deteriorates further, we actually have exact locations of where some of these gravestones are. And the sort of long-term plan is, it's nearly done, and this will be on the CAPAT website when we go live, is that we should have a 3D model of the actual landscape, and you'll be able to go to the site, and there'll be interactive points on this model, and you can click on the church, click on the Holy Well, where the survey was taken, and it will pop up with these models, information on the site. So you've got everything there at once. So that's Llanllawer Church. And then the next area of focus, so as I said at the beginning, we actually focus on a range of sites along the Preseli Ridge, and that's where all the green dots are. And we did a mixture of creating 3D models of these, and looking at some sort of artefacts and stuff like that in museums. And once again, like Llanllawer Church, we're going to have an interactive 3D view of the landscape, the whole Preseli Ridge, where there will be sort of flashing points on all the sites. You'll be able to go on site, click on it, and be able to see, read the information and see all the 3D models. And we have checked sort of Wi-Fi data and all that sort of stuff, so it does work in regions, and if not, there will be an offline version as well, just in case anyone was wondering about that. So Vouldregarn Hill Fort, the pictures I'll be using are those that have been taken by the Royal Commission Toby Driver. I got some fantastic images. Like Llanllawer Church, I absolutely love this site. It is one of the largest hill forts in West Wales, and another really important thing about this site is, as you can see on the surface, it's sort of got this, it reminds me of a golf ball. It's got all these pits on the surface, and this is where they've levelled areas of land for possible huts or storage huts as well. And there's over 270 of these hut platforms, which is the largest in the area. So even if they weren't all contemporary, we still think this would have been a really dense area of occupation. We think maybe this may have housed a leader of some sort and would have probably had a multifunctional use as well. So we think there would have been domestic living, craft, trade and exchange, and we think it would have been a meeting place and possible have some sort of ceremonial, ritual elements to it, which we'll talk about in a bit. And even though we'll talk in a minute about the work that's already gone on here, but some of the indications of this is sort of if you look just to the lower Bronze burial cairn on top, if you look to the left, there's an area which doesn't have any hut platforms, and to the northeast as well, there's less hut platforms in there, probably suggesting a different use for these parts of the site. Now, it is most commonly known as an Iron Age hill fort, dating to, or built somewhere between 700 BC and 43 AD. However, it does have earlier origins in the Bronze Age, about 2300 BC, with the burial cairns on top, which I'll talk about in a second, and then the artefacts show that this site was used all the way through to the Romano-British period as well. So that's one thing that many people don't know about the site. They just see it as the hill fort. And it is one of a number of hill forts and promontory forts that we get in the west of Wales. We have quite a dense cluster, which we're not entirely sure why, but it's really exciting for us because we have lots of hill forts and promontory forts to investigate. So just a bit of history on the sort of archaeological work that's been done on site. There's only ever been one excavation, and that was in 1899 by a man called Baring Gould. Really interesting character. Tenby Museum has a lot of information on this man. He also excavated the St David's Head Promontory Fort as well, and they had a lot of similar artefacts there. And the artefacts are all on display at Tenby Museum, and they have a lovely collection, so I really recommend going to see them. And during this excavation, they looked at quite a few hut platforms, but during this time, their excavation techniques weren't as great as today, but still it does have its value. And they created this plan of the site. Then in 1969, the Royal Commission with the Geography Department at Portsmouth Polytechnic carried out their own survey of the site, which compared to 1899, it looks like in the past they did a very good job actually. It's very, very similar, so hats off to them. And then the most recent sort of work that we've been doing, mostly through CAPAT, is looking at this new data that's just come out. And thank you to Toby, because he actually said what LiDAR was earlier, so I don't have to go into all that. But we now have this lovely model of the ground surface, which we can use. And through the LiDAR and looking at this through CAPAT, we've actually found more information about the site, which we've been able to add to our interpretation. So I'll be showing you that a bit later. So that was the archaeological work that's been done on the site. So the reason why we chose it through CAPAT is because there has been little archaeological work, and we felt like we can really increase understanding and knowledge here. So far, what we sort of know is this site, we think, has gone through many phases. So first of all, it starts off in the Bronze Age with these three lovely Bronze Age burial cairns on top. You can see it from far and wide. They've not been formally excavated, but sadly they've been dug into by antiquarians. It gets hit by a lot of wind. There's trig points at the top, and a lot of people like to take stone and also move stone around as well. So we think when they were first constructed, it'd be a little bit neater, a little bit fuller than what they are today. We then have the next phases of the site, which is during the Iron Age, where they built these lovely ramparts, stone ramparts with inner ditches. We also have a really interesting thing here where these ramparts created a stone. It would have required a lot of stone, even though they've got the inner ditch on the inside. You have these 3 Bronze Age cairns on top. They could have easily have used the stone that was there, but for them not doing that, it probably means they respected their past. Also, there is a low-lying stone wall which goes around these 3 burial cairns, which we think was constructed in the Iron Age. And if so, this probably meant it separated maybe a sort of ceremonial religious space to the activities that were going on outside. And there is an idea that maybe this site developed over time, so maybe the first rampart constructed, and then as the population grew, we then had another construction, large rampart at the side, and then to the northeast, there was another extension, but the ramparts aren't as nice or robust as we had in the other 2. So what have we done? How did Capat think that we could increase understanding and knowledge of this site? So it's mostly, one of the ways was through the artefacts. So in 1899, they found a range of artefacts dating from the Iron Age through to the Romano-British period. So we have Iron Age and Romano-British pottery. We have spindle whorls. We have glass beads, clay beads, beads made out of faience. The glass beads, one of my favourites, was one that was found, and it looks like in antiquity it had broken and then they'd glued it back together again. So I like that nice little detail. There's also a possible child's shale armlet, and then we have these really interesting sort of stone bowls, which at the time had been interpreted as oil lamps. Now, we've only seen this elsewhere at St. David's Head. We're still not sure if it's an oil lamp. It does have heat effects inside, but we're not so sure, so that probably needs to look into further. So if anyone has any suggestions, please come and talk to me afterwards. So what we thought through Capat is, one thing you find is when you go to sites like Thwristiaeth, especially if you haven't been there before, didn't know about the excavations, is that you don't really, especially with these artefacts that are at the Tenby Museum now, you have this disconnect between artefacts and the site. And the same as when they're in the museum, if you haven't been to the site before, it's quite hard to put them in their context. So through Capat, we wanted to bring them together. We wanted to bring the artefacts back to the site. And one way how we did this was once again through digitisation. So these are the static images of what we created, and these are all on Sketchfab as well. And on the Tenby Museum stall just outside, they've got these on display which you can go and move around and interact with. And just like I talked about earlier, we're going to have this 3D model of the Preseli Ridge. You'll be able to click on Thwristiaeth, comes up with information on the site and 3D models of the site and also the artefacts as well. So you have all this information together to give you a better understanding. And then here is one of the models that we created with interactive points. So you'll be able to go up onto site if you're not sure on what something is. If there's a point, you can find out information on that. We've then also been playing around a lot with the LiDAR data that's been coming through, and we've been adding different sort of, they're called visualizations on top. So with this colour scheme, it really brings out all those hut platforms, and you can really see the curb as well, the low-lying stone wall going around those 3 Bronze Age burial cairns. And what we found, like I mentioned earlier, was actually we have a lot more hut platforms than we thought before. You can see on the bottom of the screen there, we have a lot more down the side and in the northeast extension. So this has helped with our interpretation, and we've got really excited about this. And we not only looked at the LiDAR of just this feature, but we also looked at the surrounding area, and it provided us more information on not only known features, mostly post-medieval, but also some unknown ones as well. And this is where we thought it might be a good idea to have LiDAR as a citizen science activity where we can get community members involved to help identify these sites. and go out on the ground and see whether or not they're real or not. And perfect timing, I would say, but as we were wanting to do LiDAR citizen science activities, that's when we came across the Pembrokeshire Coast National Park Authority and their project where they were commissioning a more finer resolution LiDAR, so making the image a lot more clearer than what we see here. And they wanted to create a portal for volunteers, which is sort of like, there's a lot of portals created in England, so this is where you go on sort of a website, you create a free account, and you'll be able to go into the portal, and they'll have the LiDAR data, aerial photographs, the historic environment records, and historic maps, and you can lay them on top of each other. And the idea is we train volunteers in identifying archaeological sites from the LiDAR and comparing them with these other resources, and then going out onto site to ground truth them. And what we decided to do with the National Park, whilst they were producing this portal, the training pack, and waiting for the LiDAR data to come through, was we decided to do a bit of a pilot study, so a LiDAR day. It was a one-day event where we got volunteers to come in. We had a morning talking about what LiDAR is, and then we used tablets which had a sort of basic portal on there using Q fields, and they were able to flick through the LiDAR, the aerial photographs, historic environment records, and historic maps, and we showed them how to identify archaeological features, what you're looking for, and we talked about the pros and cons of LiDAR and why we need to use all these resources in conjunction. And so we did that in the morning, and then in the afternoon we went out into the field to actually look at these features and see what they actually look like on the ground. And we got a lot of positive feedback from it. So hopefully, I haven't checked with Thomas how far he's got with the training programs and the things like that, but hopefully there'll be a lot more LiDAR stuff coming up in the future, which is really exciting. Also, at the same time, we were really lucky with the National Park, also trying to find someone to help with a reconstruction of Ddiwrnod Hill Fort. So we were really eager with doing that. And so the National Park commissioned Peter Lorimer from Pig Hill Heritage Graphics to create a static reconstruction of the site and also a 360-degree view of the site, so you'll be able to walk up, stand in one of the entranceways, and be able to get a view around of what it would have been like. And that is where I'm going to leave you today. I think unless Thomas has presented this at anything else, then this will be the first time that these pictures have been shown to the public. So once again, the 360-degree view is static, but if you do want to see it, please come and see me. And it will be on the National Park website. And we're also hoping to get the boards on the gate up to Ddiwrnod updated, and there'll be a code, Thomas? Code as well, yes. So you'll be able to access all of that. So that's where I'm going to sort of leave you guys with today. So here we've got the start of our 360-degree view, and you'll be able to move around. You'll be able to see the gate behind you. And then finally, we have our once a reconstruction at the end. So yeah, thank you to working with Thomas, working with Planet, with all the community work, all our partners, David from the Cambrian Mountains Initiative, and with these, Peter Lorimer as well. So thank you everyone for listening.